right. 1.2. Oh, well, welcome everyone to the August 27th. Wow. August 27th Policy Committee.
The first of the year.
The first of the new school year. So everybody welcome to our Policy Committee meeting. We've already done 1.1. We've called the meeting to order. So 1.2, approval of the June 25th Policy Committee draft minutes. Or any comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any comments about the meeting minutes?
No, it was a good refresh because
It was a good one.
there was like this
Yeah.
black
Been a
hole
while.
that I went
Mr.
into.
Blevis had me directed back to the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes? And that's unanimous. So 1.3 is public comment, and we do have 2 folks signed up today for public comment. I'll ask when your name is called if you'll just step up to the podium, and you'll have 3 minutes. So the board and this committee views public comment as an opportunity to hear concerns of the public. Public comment will be received by this committee on issues relating to policies currently being reviewed, with the understanding and expectation that is not considered a question and answer platform with committee members. Consequently, the committee will not provide a response to public comments presented in its meeting or submitted in writing. The committee will provide a maximum of 40 minutes, and all speakers will be limited to 2 minutes for their public comment. If necessary, that's it. So you have 2 minutes. I'll give you a hands up when it gets to 30 seconds, okay? So the first person is Peter Brim.
Thank you. And understanding that it is, my name is Peter Brim. I'm here representing PFLAG Frederick. Understanding that it is not part of today's agenda, but it is in the works, I did want to offer some additional comments about Policy 443. I would suggest that we include language that teachers shall use get-to-know-you forms that document affirmed names and affirmed pronouns. We're already doing this. I know people who were baptized Edgar who would prefer to go by the name Bud. I know people who were baptized Catherine who prefer to go by the name Cat. And I just think that this is an extension of, again, an ongoing practice where we recognize and affirm the name that the person wishes to go by. I also understand that these changes take time. When I was in grade school, the only way to refer to a woman was by Miss or Mrs. We recognize culturally that we've moved past marital status as a way of using an honorific, and now we have Ms. I subscribe to you that this is very similar to that. So again, I encourage us to use the word shall as it relates to using getting to know you forms so that teachers and students can, teachers can affirm students. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next we have Allison Rizzo.
Needed those high heels. Where's she?
There's a step
I don't really need a bench. Hi. I wanted to share a couple of comments, so I'm commenting as a parent, not affiliated with any particular organization, about your fundraising policy you'll be discussing today. So I did take a look at your analysis document, the behind the scene, the supporting document, super helpful, by the way. I love that we have that now, thank you. So there's a line item for public charter schools and the impact of a policy on public charter schools. And so I've noticed kind of having a default there of it applies to all schools, applies to charter schools, just like everything else for a lot of the policies that have been discussed. In this one in particular, I feel like it needs to be called out and acknowledged somewhere within the policy. The recognition that public charter schools are operated by independent organizations that have autonomy in how they spend their funds, how they raise their funds and spend their funds. So we've had a history of conversation about student activity funds, and if the kids are involved in fundraising, it has to go to student activities. And really for a public charter school, as an independent organization, they should be able to use their money the way they need to, the way they want to support their mission. So there's statements in there, things like, the funds are then, basically FCPS funds, which would not be the case in those instances of fundraising happening in public charter schools. So if you could take a look at that and think about that as you discuss that, that would be really helpful to help in the future for people who have not had the history of conversations that have happened over recent years, but to just put in writing and understanding, and that would help in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
All right. Concludes our public comment. So we'll move right on to 1.4, Policy 426, Fundraising.
So policy 426 is here for the second time before the policy committee. It was discussed previously on March 26, 2025, when we met to discuss the board's or the panel's interests. This policy was adopted in 2006 and last revised in 2019, so it is due for a bit of a refresh. When we met in March of 2025, we discussed the robust regulation that at the time was in process and was being finalized. We have in fact finalized 2 regulations since that meeting. One is Regulation 42601, Fundraising, which was approved and adopted by the superintendent on May 27th, and 42602, which is Donations and Gifts, which was approved and adopted on August 4th, 2025. Obviously, we will adjust those regulations as needed coming out of this meeting if they're out of the board's adoption of the policy. But at the time, we felt it was necessary to get the regulations in place to make sure as we approach the next fiscal year that we were guiding staff appropriately in terms of how to fundraise and receive donations and gifts. During the policy committee meeting, we talked about the need for training for staff, including school-based secretaries. We discussed independent boosters, which is addressed in the regulation. We discussed certain definitions that the board was interested in including, and we'll come back to that when we go into the proposed edits. And we also discussed incorporating references to audit controls, reliable sourcing, priorities, compliance with the law, policy, and regulation, et cetera. And then the last interest that the panel had when we met in March was to minimize the additional work for administrators, because this is a lot, and there is a lot that our administrators do. So if you turn to page 18 of your agenda packet, that is where you will find the marked up copy of the fundraising policy. You'll see that we start with a new title. It's no longer fundraising in schools, it's fundraising donations and gifts. The rationale behind the change is that fundraising does not occur solely in schools. Fundraising can be done and donations and gifts can be received through central office as well. So we felt it made sense to suggest a modification to the title that was more inclusive of the full scope of the work. We did add a number of definitions, although not necessarily all of the definitions that were requested. Some of the terms that were asked for just weren't used other than as part of a definition, or they weren't used at all. So we felt, consistent with our practice of not defining terms that aren't being used, there was no real benefit to including those definitions. The policy statement edits are largely clarifications with modernization updates, i.e. a reference to online fundraising, and note the incorporation of references to compliance with the law and the procedures, which includes auditing. That was in response to the interest that the panel had. The implementation section is entirely new. We start with the board authorizing the superintendent to accept donations and gifts. Seemed like a reasonable place to begin. Make sure that the superintendent, because we didn't actually have any express statement that the superintendent was authorized to do so. But it must be done in accordance with the existing policies. And the standard operating procedures we speak to there. There's a student activity fund manual that speaks to receiving donations, and that's the primary document I think that we're referring to. Ms. Claybaugh and Ms. Rollerston, who are here with me today, can perhaps elaborate more on that if needed. The next paragraph is delineating what is a permissible donation or gift. What it is that should be guiding the gift giving, the donation making, and the fundraising. These are the interests that the board has and what those things should look like. Supporting the schools and the system priorities in accordance with law, in a manner that safeguards our assets and ensures reporting and accountability, your auditing request. Promotes the general welfare, education, morale, and civic mindedness of students. I mean, that is an underlying core value that this board has expressed. The next paragraph speaks to what is prohibited. What are the things that the board does not want to see with respect to donations, that conflicts with the operation of the schools, that places a restriction on the programming, that adds hidden costs to the system. It's great if you want to give us some new equipment, but then we have to spend thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintain it. Maybe we don't want that. Maybe we don't want that equipment so much. The next paragraph speaks to the naming of facilities. That is included, even though there is a separate policy on naming of facilities, because sometimes gifts, especially if they're large ones, they often want to accompany the idea, we're going to help you refurbish your stadium, but we want you to name it Blivis Stadium. Nobody's ever going to want that name for a stadium, by the way. But we felt it was important here to include it as a reference because it can often accompany a donation or a gift. The next paragraph in 5, this speaks to wish lists, online funding, and donation funding crowdsourcing. Often our teachers will create wish lists and share with parents, hey, I would love it if you provided me with tissues and snacks and whatever else goes on there. This speaks to what the board's perspective on that. And it's not saying that it's not permitted, it's not saying that it's not acceptable, it's just helping to establish the expectations around it. And then lastly, the establishment of the directive to create and maintain the regulations that we've already put in place, and which we will modify as needed. So that is those are the edits we have. I think that Ms. Rizzo, although we don't generally respond to feedback, I think Ms. Rizzo raises an interesting point that perhaps the panel should discuss is, do we need to add a specific articulation that the charters addresses the charter's needs?
I think that that's important. Actually, I was going to suggest that we take a look, we develop some language around that differentiates charters from the general ed schools.
So we can certainly draft some language and.
You agree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I agree.
100%.
It seemed to make the sense.
If there is a protocol that's already in place that they have some exceptions or have some autonomy that isn't given to the general school system.
So I think it's going to be a balancing act because while I don't disagree with the notion that where our the fundraising at a traditional school is directed to the student activity fund, and maybe it doesn't need to be necessarily the same at the charters. We do still need to make sure we're ensuring the auditing compliance, that if the donation being received is tech-based, that it still has the safeguards that are required of all of our technology, that it doesn't create a cost, that just the same. So there are some pieces of this that I think still need to apply to the charters, but there's certainly a place for that differentiation.
As I look over at Ms. Claybaugh, I mean,
I was
when
gonna
she,
say, it looked like you were thinking there for
Yeah.
a minute. I wondered if you
You know,
had some input.
Well, I appreciate the difference that happens at the charter schools. Well, once the items are put into the school, it really does become FCPS property. But at the end of the year, when we're reconciling the books, there is a payment made out to the organization. Well, it's actually now we're doing it for all the charters to their foundation that then becomes part of their audited financial statements and is put into the books of those. So and we don't direct the use of those funds once they're with the charters. But I think sometimes, in regards to where some of it may have crossed the line or been similar, it's kind of like when a PTA fundraises for an organization, we keep, our goal is to keep all of those organizations at arm's length, the PTAs, boosters, but there usually is a coordination depending upon what is happening in the school. And I realize that, for the foundations, it's a unique and very different than a booster club or a PTA. And typically, once those things are done, we then receive the funds via donation. If the PTA is doing some fundraiser and it is then made a cash donation, is usually made to the school itself so that it comes through that same and follows that process. And I would think they would probably follow a similar process if it was direct things like maybe buying a particular curriculum would then come in. Or like Steve said, I think the technology always becomes because we support through an in-kind service, we support the technology which is in the buildings. So I just think we would want to make sure that we're following our policies and regulations in regards to some of those items too. But I do understand, and I do think there's absolutely room for language in the policy to call it out specifically. I know we're in the process of renewing the charter agreements for 3 of our 4 charters, and I know there is language about the nonprofits, but I don't know how I can't off the top of my head recall how it speaks to it.
All of the current agreements, and this language will carry forward into the next agreements, all speak to that the charters do have the ability to fundraise outside of what they receive from the system without it impacting what they receive from the system. It wouldn't be offset or a reduction.
Absolutely.
That language is in there and will continue to be in there. That's not something we're changing.
So I think part of the clarifying language is how it's advertised. So if it's a school-based fundraiser at the charter school and the school is raising the money for something, then that would go into their student activity. If the governing board has a fundraiser for a capital project or something of a larger scale, it would then be their directed fundraiser, marketed, advertised. It would go with them. So same with boosters and PTAs. If the school's doing it as an event and they're sponsoring it, then the money stays at the school. Boosters, if they want to do it and then donate the money later, that's one thing. But again, there is this clear distinction, and it's really on how it's marketed and publicized and who's sponsoring.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask you to share about that exact thing, that differentiation between.
And I think at a traditional school, that differentiation is probably far more distinct because I'm in the science club and we decided to sell plants as a fundraiser. It's part of the science club is affiliated, and here we are doing that. Whereas if there were an outside, like the drama boosters, they may do something like a karaoke at a downtown bar, but that's not really, they're raising money, but that's not, and so there's a much easier distinction, I think, in a traditional school than and that's where we have gotten involved in regards to saying, oh, this feels like it really should run through the SAF because it feels like it's a student-driven activity. And the Student Activity Fund is really about usually a student-driven activity. So I think that's probably where we probably just need to put some of this.
Is that outlined in regulation?
It's outlined within our student activity manual. The other thing with the student activities in the past 4 years, they are now part of our financial statements. So we've put a significantly more, not that we weren't spending a lot of time with our student activity funds, but they are now incorporated into the financial statements. So we spend more time auditing and ensuring that we're following those rules and regulations because it has become a defined part of your, and it's about, I think last year at the end of the year, it was about over $2 million in assigned balances to the Student Activity Fund. So it's not small change that we're talking about. So that's why we.
Secretaries lose sleep,
Yeah.
right, at the schools.
There's lots of volume, small dollar transactions, so the number of transactions that run through SAF is significant. And at the high school level, the dollars are significant as
Yeah.
well.
And do they have to, like, I'll give you an example I've heard of, like if it's adult driven, like I've seen boosters programs have a barbecue dinner, adults, for the boosters. Then there's also the case where the kids sell the little cards, the discount cards for the boosters. So in that case, one would be it's student driven, student activity fee. The dinner.
Well, if they're selling it on behalf of if I'm on the football team and I'm selling it on behalf of the boosters, that's a booster activity, and we do hold that at arm's length. We do ask the schools a lot of times to, with the liaison to the boosters, which tends to be the athletic boosters, especially at the high school level, tends to be the most busy or has the most things going on, through that liaison to coordinate so that we're all not selling the same thing at the same time. So that's where we, even though we hold them at arm's length, we do seek to coordinate so that we don't flood the market, as it were, or overwhelm the market, as it were, in regards to that. But no, like usually it's if, let's say, the football team itself decided to do something, like maybe they were going to do a fundraiser for a teammate or something like that. Melissa, you're going to have to tell me that I'm wrong as soon as I cross the line. That could run through student activities. But it's really about student-driven or a student club. Doesn't mean that there's not an adult involved, because as the advisor to the science club, I would be helping them. But if we decide we want to divert those funds, like the science club raised a lot of money, we're able to support, and then there was a tragedy in the community and wanted to then donate to assist that, usually the students direct that. They say, we would like to do this, and we're going to use some of our proceeds to do that, because they were the ones doing the fundraising. So we want to give the students not really autonomy, but they're the ones who raise the funds. They've raised it for a particular activity. When they have some left over, we want to give them either the chance to hold on to it, because they know next year they're going to need those funds again. And everything that's raised for student activity funds, there are different categories. So at any given time, where the high school is probably the most robust student activity funds, we can say the drama club has this much money in their category, and we can tell them at any given time what they have. So that's where there's that's why that accounting becomes, in the traditional schools, very integral to the day-to-day
And is
operation.
the principal responsible for the connection between the school and the boosters?
Typically, the principal designates someone. So at the high school level, the coordinator, the AD, is usually the liaison, or the band director to the band boosters. Some principals do attend. Like some principals are it all depends upon the size of the school and how many administrators are available. But they'll be the liaison to the PTSA, those kind of things. So it's usually the principal will designate that as a leadership role for either an administrator, or if there's sometimes a teacher leader.
And I would say too, when we talk about the arm's length, whether it's the boosters, the PTA, or the governing boards of charters, where we just really want to protect the board is the affiliated. So, something would go wrong, having that directed by, this was a booster run program, not an FCPS sponsored, all you're going to see is Frederick County Public Schools on the headline. And so that trying to make sure that we protect FCPS and those arm length affiliated groups is really important. And we partner with them because it certainly does supplement our extracurriculars.
Yeah, I think it plays an important role. It just, like you said, it always reflects on us when something goes wrong in a booster's.
And we have to be keenly aware, especially when it comes to athletics, of Title IX compliance, because we don't want to set ourselves up to be out of compliance in regards to the boosters have decided they're only supporting women's teams. That's the only thing we're going to support, and we got all new uniforms for the women's teams and did nothing for the men's teams. And that's why we do have a liaison to those organizations, because at the end of the day, we are held in compliance to those Title IX issues. So if there's an issue, we would then have to put out the funds. So if they built dugouts for one team and didn't build it for the other team, FCPS, if it was deemed not to be in compliance for Title IX, would then be on the hook for those additional funds. So that's why we have to, of course, have a relationship with these organizations. And as Melissa stated, it's always Frederick County Public Schools booster. And if something would go awry, and we're very fortunate that doesn't happen, but when it does, it's money for students, and you can understand why people would be upset and want to know, what are you doing, FCPS, in relationship to it. So that's why we try to create the arm's length, have a liaison, but to be aware of what's happening, but also try not to get involved in their business, because they have the right to fundraise.
And the Title IX applies to the individual school.
Yes. I'm shaking my head yes, and I'm looking over there to affirm.
Because
Yes.
the other side of that is we talk about equity between
Absolutely.
schools. That boosters at Urbana and Oakdale certainly.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always, depending upon that always becomes the concern. And I know a few months ago when we talked about a scoreboard being replaced at one of our high schools, well, frankly, we're very pleased that they were able to do that, because that then, if we need to replace a school that doesn't have, maybe as an active, as a booster club, we can be like, check, we've taken care of that. Now we can go take care of this one. So we definitely appreciate what the community is providing, and look to be able to ensure that all of our schools have similar facilities.
Another comment I would just make is, in the regulation, we speak to the building modifications and grounds. So when a affiliated organization wants to do significant fundraising for an effort of either a concession stand or a track or something, it's really critical that we have that partnership with those organizations to ensure that our maintenance and operations team is well on board with support, ongoing, making sure we have the right easements to even put something in place, and just having that communication and that partnership is critical. We speak to that a lot in the regulation, along with the technology that the modification to building and grounds is also.
And that's applicable not just to big building projects.
Yes.
It can be as small as a koi pond.
Right.
And just for your information, we revised those regulations in the spring, and we did training with principals and with secretaries this summer as part of our mandatory principal training and then our in-service. Plus, we're then following up, because the regulation is robust. So there are lots of where we could offer ways for principals to accept donations without having to go through a significant amount of approval at the central office level. We put in tiers of acceptance. And so it's been, I think most of the principals have been super excited, because now if they get the $200 check from the Lions Club, they don't need Dr. Dyson's approval. They can simply accept it and then move on with their lives. And we have a form, and they're keeping a log, so at the end of the year we can see all of that information. But we have tried to be thoughtful about not creating onerous regulations, but still mitigating risk. Because, Melissa and I, we are auditors at our hearts, so we would love to put as many internal controls as we possibly could, at every moment. But we also know there's a cost to internal controls, so you mitigate risk. And we, the summer before, we did fraud training with everyone, so we're really trying to make this a robust program, so that everybody is on the same page.
I'm always apprehensive to slow the process of moving policies forward, but I don't know how you all feel, but I feel like in this case, I'd like the two of you to put your heads together to put a paragraph or something together that just outlines the autonomy and yet the connection of charter schools, to place it in the policy and then come back.
Brings it back to policy committee.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, and I call it bounded autonomy. It's bounded autonomy.
Yeah.
Because it isn't without.
Right.
restriction.
It references the association the agreements between the charters and the schools and things like
And then related
that.
to facility modifications and things like that. I mean, there are some limits that I think it's not complete autonomy.
Yeah.
Well, for the charters, they are, two of the charters are in their own building, so.
So that's different.
So that of course is different.
There's-
And two of the charters are in our buildings,
Right,
and
exactly.
and the lease, or will be, one is and one will, as next August. Feels that can't be that could be that close. But those things are clearly outlined in their lease agreements. So we do cover that when it comes to our
Yeah.
buildings that they are leasing. But when it comes to the charters who are in their own buildings, we do not have any.
They don't need our.
We have some.
MSDE has approval authority over modifications to the charter school buildings, and staff are required to review and approve the modifications as well. And this is an MSDE requirement. This isn't something that we affirmatively choose. We're told we have to do this. So there is a place for the system in the modification, but it's driven by the charters.
Okay, so MSDE says there has to be oversight, but the oversight goes to the local?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both. The MSDE also So for example, when
Well, it's within our district or our authority.
when Monocacy Valley purchased their building, one of the requirements is that I, as Chief Legal Counsel for Frederick County Public Schools, review their purchase agreement. I have no interest in their purchase agreement. I have no clue why I need to look at it, but that's what MSDE requires, so that's what I did, and then I certified that it was legally sufficient. They got their own attorneys to do that. I don't know why they need me to do that, but that's what the state wants, so that's what we do.
So are there any specific changes or edits that you saw?
No, not other than what we've just
Okay,
discussed.
because I wanted to make sure if we're sending it back to them, it doesn't come back to us and then we have to do it again,
And
so.
and Celeste is the parent side of this.
Yeah.
I'm going back to my PTA at Green Valley Playground and my Safe and Sane at Urbana High and band. I was the treasurer for both.
Well, and I will say the 25-page document that outlines the relationship between the booster organizations and FCPS is detailed, and I know that it's still under discussions, but due to those trainings that happened over the summer, we have also had meetings then with our principals and all the presidents of our associations to talk about those things and kind of dive a little bit deeper. So it is trickling in, and I think there's a lot more awareness now too. I think I've been there for a while, so I know how things are supposed to go. But also I think other people are tuning into the fact that, hey, we really need to pay attention to how this relationship works, and what my role is and what your role is. And at our school, we have an assistant principal that's with every booster association, and our principal meets with PTSA. So it's an ideal relationship, I think. All activities are coordinated through admin. Like, they know what we're all doing all the time. They know every fundraiser. Like, to me, it's the way it should be. And everybody really works together. So, but arm's length for money, absolutely. And that's something that we are extra careful about. So it's the trainings and all of the documentation that we've had have been helpful.
And we are as you said, we're in the process of revising that. Our goal is to hopefully have the booster revision manual out for the winter season. So we started with the conversation, and we're having conversations now. And so we'll be looking to update that and provide a little less guidance on what you as a 501c3 need to do, because that feels a little too close to us. That's really your decision. You need to work that out. But here are some websites you can go visit. So we're just in the process of taking care of that.
So if the only edit that the panel is looking for is the addition of a paragraph with, kind of detailing how the charters fit in more explicitly, I'm going to suggest that we don't need to bring it back to policy committee. The panel has made it clear what the interest is. I think Ms. Clayball and I, Ms. Rolson, we're all capable of putting our heads together, coming up with something. And I would even suggest that, Ms. Rizzo, I might reach out to you and share that with you so you can weigh in on it before it gets incorporated, and that we can just bring it right to the board with that addition. It's up to you, of course, but I would say if that's the only edit, I don't know that we need to bring it back.
We're able to make edits at first reading, so.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, for first reading, and I do think that I'm agreeable to that, because we do have still an opportunity.
Yeah,
Right,
and I
absolutely.
appreciate the collaboration and the cooperation. That gives me more confidence that when it comes to first reading, we'll be in good shape.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
So we need a motion?
Oh, I move that we send it to the board for first reading.
A second?
All those in favor?
Can we amend that
Yeah.
with the?
Yeah, with
Oh, sorry,
With
with the.
the proposed addition.
Proposed additions, yes.
Of
Yeah,
charter school.
thank you.
Yes, I
Yes.
second.
Okay, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. All right, so 1.5, Policy 400, Systemic Delegation of Duties.
So this is the first time this policy is coming to this policy committee. This is a little bit of a deviation from our practice where we have brought things before the board for guidance before providing edits. We felt in part to help move the process along because we're trying to keep to a schedule of getting a certain number of policies done each year. But in addition, because this is largely driven by work from my office, there's no other department that's really weighing in too directly in the drafting of this. We felt it was appropriate to come with some edits to suggest. This policy was first adopted in February of 1972, one of our oldest policies. It was updated in 2006 and again in 2018, so it's still a little bit long in the tooth and due for some updating. We have created, this is on page 30 of your agenda packet if you're trying to follow along in the PDF. We created a policy purpose. It is relatively straightforward to define the scope of the delegation of decision-making authority. We did not feel there were any terms that required definitions. The policy statement is really regarding the board and superintendent's authority as a matter of law. It draws from the statutes that outline what your and her respective authorities are. The implementation, we are removing the board member designation of person in charge. That's our recommendation. We feel that probably belongs more appropriately in policy 101, which, as it happens, is also up for discussion today. And so it makes sense that we could, if we're going to be modifying one, we can modify it to relocate that language to where it probably belongs.
We'll need to renumber, which I don't.
Yes, we will of course correct it. D2 is an express statement that the board retains ultimate responsibility and authority over governance and policy. We thought it was an appropriate and important statement to make sure it's clear that even though you are delegating authority and the superintendent's delegating authority, that ultimately it is your responsibility. D3 establishes the principles around delegating authority. It doesn't state a specific person or a specific kind of authority that's being delegated, but again, it's the considerations that the board wants to be factored in when deciding to delegate authority. So it has to be in writing, and it has to be limited in scope, limited in duration. It clearly defined what the authority being delegated is. It's to a position, not to a person. So I'm not delegating to Paul Lebo. I'm delegating to our chief operating officer. So if Paul is not in that role for whatever reason, we don't have to go back and redelegate. It's the delegation will live beyond Mr. Lebo's scope of his role.
But it does say unless temporary, which is like, coming to my mind is like, if Dr. Dyson's going to be out of town, she will temporarily.
Yes.
Right, if you're out of district or unavailable, you have to delegate.
Yeah.
And that
If
is.
she's home sick, she doesn't have to delegate.
Right.
Gotcha.
And obviously the requirements of remaining within law, policy, regulation. We can't delegate around those requirements. And then ultimately, just like we're making sure that we've stated the board is ultimately responsible, the person making the delegation is ultimately responsible. So when Dr. Dyson steps out and heads off to a conference in Texas and she's not available, and she's delegated Dr. Sergo here in her place, Dr. Dyson is still responsible. It is still her responsibilities, even though Dr. Sergo may be making a decision on her behalf and within the scope and authority of the delegation. It is still Dr. Dyson's responsibility. The next paragraph, D4, this is the delegation of authority by the superintendent. This is the board making it clear that the superintendent has the operational authority to delegate. Again, it's always seemed inherent that she has the ability to do that, but it's never been expressly stated. Now we're making it an express statement that the board understands the superintendent is going to delegate responsibilities. One of which is, in her absence, she will designate a cabinet member to serve in her stead. And then to further delegate duties or functions to one of her professional assistants. Professional assistants is the term used in the statute for who the superintendent brings on board, and so we wanted to mirror the statutory language there. The place where this becomes most relevant, a lot of appeal decisions that come to her, she delegates. So a student suspension will often get delegated to the Director of Student Services. The McKinney-Vento appeal would also end up in front of the Director of Student Services. Rather than going to the superintendent, it gives her the ability to delegate that responsibility to the person best suited to consider it. So transportation appeals often get referred over to get delegated to Dr.
I get everything else.
Yeah, well, pretty much.
What's left?
What you should know is that the superintendent,
Just sign
she
off
still
on it.
reviews and signs off on it. It's never just Dr. Sergo or Dr. Lebo or Dana Falls issuing a decision, they always go back to her and she signs off saying, yes, I approve this decision. And that's part of the delegation. We also address the delegation authority of principals. Really, there is no change here than what is in the existing policy other than to clean up a little bit of language. So that is the proposed edits for systemic delegation of duties.
So would we want to add any language that defines the condition in which authority is delegated? Like you said, it would have to be out of district.
Or unavailable.
Or unavailable, right. So that, you know, that actually is in there to define those, that's the.
So there's different types of delegation, which I think was what Mr. Blivis is referring to. So there's sort of like general delegation, which she tends to write a formal memo and notifies the board,
Yeah.
like, I'm traveling to Texas to visit my grandchildren, and Dr. Lebo is the acting superintendent, versus some of the sort of internal delegation of authority. So there's delegation of duties and delegation of authority. So the delegation of authority is related to how we do appeals. So there's a lot of regulations that say superintendent or designee. It's sort of all over our regulatory language. So because it would be impossible for her to be the person who personally handles every appeal, every, you know, sort of procedural thing. So there's different types of delegation. I think it's implied in here. But I don't know, Mr. Blivis, if you think we need to
I'm
distinguish
just throwing it
them.
out there, just because reading through this, it's, you know, I try to look at a policy as if
Right.
I was somebody on the outside.
sure,
Trying to
sure.
understand what's going on the
Sure.
inside.
Yeah, I would then say it would be delegation of authority and delegation of duties, and that
Yeah.
might cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can certainly add something to create a distinction between delegation due to absence versus delegation due to operational need.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect.
Yes, yeah, there are different types.
Yes, yeah.
Like that.
And I think it's important also for employees, because there's times where people think that when they, let's say, use an appeal as an example, that they're going to get audience with the superintendent, and that's what they want. And you say, well, no, actually, you know, so she doesn't hear appeals personally. Or when people, frankly, are terminated, they don't get a hearing before the superintendent. There's a delegation of authority for Laudermill hearings, which are required by statute. Those are done by the director of HR. So she's involved and she gets briefed on all of that, and she, of course, has to sign off and approve any of those types of things. But I think it will also help employees to understand the delegation procedure
Okay.
across the
Good.
board. Yeah.
Good, yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, in that case.
The more clarity, the
Don't want
better.
to stop anybody. I was going to make a motion to move this to the board for first reading with the recommended changes.
I'll second that.
All in favor? And that's unanimous.
So before we move on to the flag display and salute, this subject is going to come up again when we get to the 100 series, because there is a specific policy with respect to the superintendent. It's policy 103. And I would imagine that there will end up being a bit of a cross-reference if we don't make the decision to displace this into 103. But that's more than a year away.
Okay.
Does somebody need to do something?
Stay in.
Who's driving? Oh.
Okay.
Ignore that.
I just have to say, I love this new system.
Yeah. Once I remembered how to get into it on a new
like-
device.
Oh, I do too.
This, you know, being able to put your notes in here, this is just awesome.
Oh, the Granicus?
Yeah.
This-
You all don't
What?
love it on the other end, but.
I don't love Granicus personally because it.
Because you've got to go through 150 pages to find what you're looking for.
It's harder to. I've had to have Ms. Carson create for me a physical copy of things to find things faster.
That's what's interesting, is it's much easier for us to navigate it than it is
You
for
don't have to
the
down,
public.
for us it's not, for us it's not.
You all have this, basically the same view as the public.
Well, because what I liked was if I'm looking for something specific, I can click on that agenda item and get the documents associated with that agenda item.
Now I can't.
You've got to go through the entirety, and I think a lot of people don't want to see our cover page. They don't want to see they want the thing, and so it's just a lot to look through.
You look at
That's
one of our
interesting,
longer
'cause
policies.
I don't know what the public view looks like.
Yeah, it's the same that we had.
It's the full book.
Okay. Talk to
It's an
Grant.
awful-
51 pages.
Well, and not to get on a sidetrack, the other thing that's complicated for us is that we don't have the kind of rights anymore to see the confidential stuff that we used to see. So we see as staff the same thing that the public sees. So for Mr. Blivis and I, as we're preparing for close or other things, we can't see closed session stuff anymore. So it's just for, like, it's fine.
And
We're making it work.
It's a limitation on their system.
Yeah,
It's
it's them, not
anything
us.
that they can change. It is what it is, and we have workarounds that we have developed, that we have implemented to make it functional for us. But
All right.
I appreciate, though, that you like it and that it's working better for you.
Yeah, for us, it's amazing.
Yes, I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
because
Wow, that's.
I like this note, this is something that I, go back to.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Because my memory is,
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Well, you can always go back and watch the recorded videos.
yeah, but that's,
That's time.
yes, that's,
Well, but with the grant.
Double speed.
I don't know.
yeah,
There's
okay.
something different with the grant.
Okay, so
All
let's
right.
move
All right.
on to policy
Sorry,
425.
I
That's
read
okay.
Policy 425, flag display and salute. This is the first time it's on before the policy committee. Again, we're deviating from the practice by proposing edits at its first viewing. This was adopted in November of 2006 and last updated in November of 2019. Again, a little bit long in the tooth, due for some updating. In fact, what I'm proposing, if you look at the copy that's in the binder, which starts on page 40 of the agenda packet, I'm basically recommending we abandon the old version and start fresh. It's almost as if it's a decommission and creation of a whole new policy.
That's what I noticed was there really wasn't a red line.
Right, I was
version.
gonna
Red line.
Just all blue,
It's
so.
all blue. It's
Yeah.
all blue because it's all, like, we've just abandoned what was in there before. And part of the reason for that is it wasn't a very robust policy to begin with. And much of what's in there really is regulation, how to take care of the flag, how to hang, that the Maryland or the U.S. flag is always on top of the Maryland flag if they're both being flown on the same flag staff. That's regulation, and we don't have a regulation yet, but we're going to. We're going to create a regulation that provides for the care and maintenance of flags and things like that.
Will it include what flags are appropriate to fly and what
There
flags
is a
are?
section.
We've got that in here, and that's a place where we definitely have some room for discussion today before the committee. Because again, this is another one that lives really in my office. I consulted with Dr. Levo because there's obviously an operational piece to this. I consulted with Dr. Alavito because there's also a school-based piece of this. But at the end of the day, really, the work on this lived in my office. So let me walk you through it, and we can stop and talk as you need. It's a very simple policy purpose statement. We're using language from the Education Code 7-105 to speak to displaying the flags and the patriotic exercises. That's the term in the statute. Again, no definitions, really didn't feel like any were needed for this particular policy. There are 3 policy statements. One is a commitment to honoring the flag. One is a recognition of a desire that there may be the desire to display other flags. And then the last is the commitment to patriotic observances and the rights of the individual within those patriotic observances. In terms of implementation, D1 speaks to the displaying of the American flag. This comes out of the code, 7-105. There's also the United States Code. It's 4 USC 7, or do I have that backwards? 7 USC 4. 7 USC 4. I think I might have that backwards. No, 4 USC 7. 4 USC 7. That is the federal statute that speaks to displaying the flag.
If I can just say, there was a big to-do, it's probably been 15 years ago. There was going to be, I think it even had to do with the President of the United States, something with one of the northern schools, and somebody was irate that there were no flags in the classrooms. It was summer. So the fact that it says while school is in session is absolutely crucial.
And that is a requirement, but that is also the way it is written in the statute, so we're piggybacking off the statute. Paragraph 2D2 is display of the Maryland flag. There actually is nothing that specifically requires us to display the Maryland flag, but it's certainly something we do at times and can do. And so rather than it is a shall be displayed like it is with the United States flag, it is a may be displayed. 3 speaks to display of other flags. This is where we have the conversation about what is an appropriate flag to display. The way it's framed in this paragraph, flags are acceptable as long as it is not disrupting the learning environment or infringing on the rights of others. That language should sound somewhat familiar because I drew it from Tinker. That is where that language came from. That gives a lot of freedom to the schools to fly flags that are appropriate. We have a lot of schools that are very diverse, having students from many different countries, and the schools like to display the flags of the countries that they represent the students, and that's permissible under this paragraph of the policy. The blue ribbon flag for being a blue ribbon school is permissible under this policy. We are express in stating that flag includes banners to make it clear that it's not a flag, it's not on a flagpole. Well, it's a banner hanging on the side. Same thing from the board's perspective. And if you're a state champion, we should fly the flag to show that you're the state champion, right? I mean, that's something we want to honor the work that our students do and the successes that our students have.
Urbana High in their stairwell has like the Teachers of the Year.
Yeah. Now, I want to note for you that this is a may include. It could have been may include, but is not limited to, but that sounds a little overly legalese, and I try and stay away from things like that as best I can. I know I'm like the only lawyer that doesn't want to talk like a lawyer. That's specific. The may include is specifically there because I don't want to try and create a list of what is and what is not appropriate. Our athletic programs have flags on the sides of the stadium because they've sold advertising, right? That's not excluded by this. It's just not called out.
Considering those banners that are, say, hung on the fences at football stadiums as flags?
For the purposes of this, yes. I mean, that's why I specifically say flags include banners, but I also am recommending that we do not expressly, and we can incorporate as in the list, those kinds of things, but I don't know that we need to, since it is a may include, but it's not limited to type language.
I'd rather not get overly restrictive.
Yeah, I mean, the longer you make the list, the more difficult it is to say this belongs to, because even though it's not listed. The shorter the list is really the better. The exception to all of this is to the flag is if it's a historical artifact that's taught as part of a curriculum in accordance with Board Policy 516. There may be flags that get displayed for that purpose, and that's okay. That's a part of the mission, right? We're educating students.
The one thing I would say about, because this happened at TJ, and where nobody would have known, but the blinds were left open and you could see a flag from outside, and so, that makes the paper. Is there any kind of, I guess, again, you don't want to get too much into a time frame, and if it's referenced in Policy 516, that probably covers it.
I think it's the notion of it's like with clothes, like what is considered a disruption to the learning environment. And so if something becomes disruptive, the context of that could be variable depending on the circumstances, the political environment, the issue at hand. So I think it makes sense to say, like, really anything that's hung or displayed, the board has a right to sort of oversee and make decisions about what's okay.
So are those going to come to the board on a case-by-case basis because they're not specifically outlined in the policy?
No, I mean, you're directing the superintendent to create a regulation to implement the flag.
Proper display and care of these items.
So we can, there can be a process developed for if there needs to be review. I would hesitate to make it a requirement because you're gonna end up having hundreds of, well, do I need to submit this flag? Do I need to submit this flag? And can I get the approval for this flag? I think we'll have to think carefully as we're developing the regulation, how we craft that review process. It may need to be more of a reactive process than a proactive process. As opposed to, so not I need to get permission, but I'll defend if someone raises a concern about.
Yeah, I mean, so the issue, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the idea of instructional speech, right? Like, and it's sort of extended to the idea of what's hung in a classroom, and it sort of is still the right to govern it, but most school systems delegate that to the superintendent and to the principal to decide, is it appropriate and does it infringe on the rights of others? Is it disruptive? It wouldn't necessarily be inside of a board policy.
But what about in the regulation, will there be a process for which a student or a staff member could,
Challenge something?
challenge something?
Yeah, that exists right now. That's typically addressed at the local school level. I mean, I think if you're looking, Mr. Rose, for some sort of a policy statement, you could say, all flags and banners in our spaces must reflect, the board's values of blah, 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 blah. And sort of that's a measurement for it, support the instructional program, reflect our values of inclusivity and diversity, those kinds of things. And comply with federal and state law, sort of as an overarching.
I'm gonna say that I think that I wouldn't include that. I wouldn't include that language.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't include that language because I'm just uncomfortable in a situation like that saying the board,
Yeah.
because we're all individuals when it comes to situations like this.
You might leave it as it is and know that there'll be a regulation that will sort of.
Right, and we can craft the regulation we have developed a good process in making sure that the needs of the policy are addressed by the regulation.
How's it handled now? How do you guys manage?
A lot of it is through the, what's 501? What's the one you just mentioned?
516?
516, yeah, I mean, I would say generally speaking, there isn't a lot of controversial things being hung in classrooms. But when it's occurred, typically it's addressed at the local level, at the principal level, and they work with our association partners who often will represent individuals in this circumstance, and we look for, but it's not a frequent occurrence.
I think I've gotten one call
Yeah.
in my 3 years here almost about a flag, and it wasn't even a flag in a classroom, it was a flag on the back of a truck in the car circle.
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah, it was a real big issue during COVID when it came to people's virtual backgrounds, right? This is sort of, right, it was a big one, and I don't think the board wants to insert itself inside of the sort of what becomes unfortunately a continuum of the political dimensions of our district, right? Like, well, are you allowed to have a Black Lives Matter background versus a LGBTQ plus background? So it's sort of like, if it has nothing to do with the instructional program, that's, it's like the same thing with your signature and your email, things like that. The purpose of these tools and resources are to teach the curriculum, and so we don't really have many people really even testing that boundary at this point, but the regulation would govern that. We'd approach it like any other concern resolution process that we have.
So to continue, the fourth paragraph speaks to patriotic observances. The first paragraph in there speaks to providing the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. We can do that through the PA system as opposed to expecting each teacher to lead the pledge. We specifically include what the pledge is. Wasn't in there previously. I've seen it in some other policies that they actually write the pledge.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's also in the statute.
We do not have the original version.
What's the original version?
Get the comma out of there between one nation, under God. There is no comma. Ask Paul. Military.
No Oxford comma in the pledge?
No,
I object.
There's lots of commas. That part's not right.
I object as
Under
well.
God, Oxford
It's not just one nation
I know, I'm just.
under God.
It's
One nation under God.
I
say it.
Yeah.
My first principal, Emily Sines, said it correctly on the PA system.
Listen,
Most people say it wrong. There is, now this is an accepted version. It is accepted, but it is not the original version. Under God was in.
But actually, Under God's not in the
The
original.
original version, the 1890s.
Isn't that
I'm going to
interesting?
go back to the statute.
Yes.
We're gonna see what's in the
But
statute.
this is the version.
The Pledge of Allegiance is actually spelled out in the statute. I will go back to the statute and make sure it matches.
Certain things, you know, someone, I read an article this week, someone tried to change the ABC song, and there was like a revolt. Because kids had trouble with the LMNOP. They changed it, and it stirred things up. So, yeah, we want to make sure we get it right.
It's truly not a big deal, that is how we say it, but that is not the updated original
I will
version
make
from the
sure-
1950s.
I will make sure that we match the statute.
Thank you.
Important details.
I did
I'm
feel
on
it was,
Oxford Common Law.
I did feel it was important to include C, which is that, the express statement that you can
I'm an
opt
honor
out
position.
of participating in the pledge. What is new to the concept is D, and that is, while you may choose to opt out, you can't be disruptive of others who choose to opt in. You're not going to be disciplined for opting out, but you're going to be disciplined for being disruptive and interfering with the observance of others. Again, I looked at a lot of different LEA policies, and that is included elsewhere. It is not.
Yeah, that's consistent.
Not something I created out of whole cloth, but it made a lot of sense to me.
It does.
That's how the board opens your meetings. I think there's some, I don't know exactly what the language is, but it's like we invite you to
Yes.
stand for the pledge. It's sort of like a,
Yeah,
right, versus we require you.
right.
So the one other thing that I'm going to add that's not a necessarily substantive, but it's a new feature to the policies that we're going to start working with going forward. It occurred to me that if you look at the policy online, you can click the link. If you're looking at a printed out version of the policy, you're not even going to know that there's a link there. And maybe you're working on a system that doesn't do links very well. So we have started to add at the end of the related information links, the URL. One of the things that I've started to do is use Bitly. Bitly is a service, it's an online service, it's approved by FCPS for our use, by our DTI has approved it, and it's just it just shortens the URL and it serves as a tunnel to take you to whatever the end address is. So you'll see I have Bitly FCPS Board Policy 516. We're actually going to get a custom branded address. It's going to be fcpsmd.info/ whatever the back end name we want to use. So that's going to change a little bit when this comes back to the board. Part of the reason for why we did that is if you go to the very last link, where the Maryland Code annotated General Provision 7201 to 7207, can you imagine someone having to manually type that in from a piece of paper they're looking at?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be a lot easier to type in fcpsmd.info/ General Provision 7201?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be a lot easier? So we're trying to, this is really an upgrade in trying to make the information more accessible.
Okay.
Good on you if you make Comar easier to.
Well,
You can't even find stuff when you go.
I
I have a physical copy that's easier than the online
yes.
version.
The online version is not my favorite,
Change it all the time, so you have to change it all the time.
but it is what we have to work with. So, Mr. Rose, you look like you have something to say.
Well, I mean, I guess how are we differentiating between this flag display and, say, a teacher's right, First Amendment right, to display a flag on their desk?
Well, you mean another flag, not a Maryland, like,
Well, a pride flag.
well, that's not considered, that's, go
Well,
ahead.
I think that I don't know, and
I mean, there's an example being there's.
forgive me, Justin, but I don't know that teachers necessarily have the right to display on their desk a flag of their choosing. I don't know that the First Amendment would protect that in that space.
Because it's considered school-sponsored speech, not individual speech, when it's in your classroom.
Now, if that falls within the confines of 4 or 3A as something that is not disruptive to the learning environment, that's perfectly fine.
There are a lot of things that aren't disruptive to the learning environment, but for some reason they're disruptive to the public. I'll give you an example. Right now, there's a lawsuit going on where the media specialist had over the door of her library said, "All are welcome here," and it was in rainbow colors. that somehow triggers people.
Oh, I mean, I've read about that.
She took it down
Yeah.
and then said, you know what, screw this. She put it back up. They fired her. She's suing them.
So I think it's an interesting question that makes me wonder about the definition of a flag, because the definition of a flag in this context is sort of the official sort of state or local government symbol of a country or whatever.
That's why I asked the question about banners.
A flag that is those are considered expressive symbols that may be produced in flag version and things like that, expressive support. They have, the law, as I understand it, has limited protected speech for those types of things. But I don't know what we would want the board policy to say about that.
That's why I'm a little careful. I'm a little apprehensive about the connection to banners, because frankly, I've been in a lot of schools, and they all have rainbow banners up somewhere within their confines saying all are welcome here, all are safe, all are this. So I'm a little. I don't want to start controversy where no controversy exists.
Well, that's kind of where I was going too when I talked about how do we handle when somebody objects to a display of a banner or a flag.
So I think two things. One, I think we might want to distinguish in the policy, maybe in the definitions, the difference between a flag and an expressive symbol, because they're different.
There you go, a definition.
Right? There's one. Now you've got one.
Separate use of the term expressive
But
symbol.
I think the regulation would spell out how we would handle those particular things. I'm having a hard time answering it only because we have such a wide range of beliefs and perspectives in the school system, and I'd say right, wrong, or otherwise, there's tolerance for all kinds of perspectives. The questions become, so we haven't had challenges on either side. I mean, we've had concerns in the past of kids who had Confederate flags on their belt buckles, that other people in the school had concerns with how a student was even dressed. I mean, it's beyond employees. So I think in each case, whether it be an expressive symbol of something, whether it be a belt buckle, whether it be a banner, whether it be a rainbow display, we would work, our leaders would work to address, like, what's the underlying issue? How is this disruptive? Measure it against our other regulations.
The intention with including, for the purposes of this policy, a flag includes banners. The intention there was, if an issue comes up over a banner versus a flag, and the difference being a flag is flown on a flagpole,
Right.
and a banner is affixed to a wall in some fashion, tape, hooks, whatever, but not necessarily flown the same way a flag is flown. If without that statement, there's no express statement of the position of the board on the banners. We don't have that there for someone to point to, and so someone could say, well, I didn't know that this banner would be considered a disruption to the classroom. It's not there's nothing that says, that says it's even subject to the board's oversight and review. Including that, especially the way this paragraph is framed as a open and kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, tolerant. I mean, it really does tolerate pretty much any flag or banner as long as it doesn't create a disruption to the learning environment. It brings the banners within that, and then no one can say, well, I didn't know that this wasn't covered.
I feel like, listening to your question, policy 516 might care for this, because I'm looking at it now, and policy 5, although this one also needs some love.
Well, 516.
Not there yet, I know.
We're getting there. 516's on the list.
I know, but
That many years ago that it was.
But it does speak to the notion of what one of the definitions of controversial issue, a point or matter about which there exists significant opposing viewpoints or multiple perspectives. And it goes on to sort of talk about the standard of something being controversial, has some conditions that would be met, and then talks about how those issues must be presented in an impartial and objective manner, and within the context of a curricular objective, and that there are ways in which principals in consultation with central office leaders would be responsible for approving or examining or considering those things that are happening in classrooms that might be considered controversial. I feel like it covers that without us deviating this policy too far away from the intent around display of flag.
Yeah, no, I like the paragraph where we're very broad. We're not saying this is and this isn't.
Can I tell you
prefer
that
that.
when that one was reviewed,
516?
Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
I obviously was not on policy since I've only been on since the beginning of the year. But they wanted to take out the teaching of controversial. So they want to take out the word controversial. And it basically became, it's teaching. I looked and I said, that's what teachers do every day. Why do we need a policy for that?
Well, because there are people
So
who.
they put the word controversial back in because it needed to be special situations, not every day, day to day, what we're supposed to do in schools. I kind of laughed about it, but they were trying to, it was with some very sincere feedback from some of our groups and all, but I just thought, that's what we do every day. So they put it back in, and we kept it, but,
516 will be back in front of the policy committee in March.
okay.
So it is on our roadmap, it is on our agenda.
Okay.
Are there things that you saw or feel that should be included, Dean, or
No,
no?
I think as Dr. Sergo pointed out, it's probably going to be a continual discussion when we get to 516.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
I'm comfortable with the, like I said, I'm comfortable with the paragraph being broad.
And we have the opportunity with the regulation, which does not exist, but will. We have the opportunity to provide the kind of guidance that you're asking for, which is
Yeah.
the day-to-day, how do we deal with this guidance as opposed to the bigger picture. We support the American flag, we support the Maryland flag, and we accept that there may be other flags that people want to fly.
Yeah. Because I just think there's, again, looking back to the incident that happened at TJ, I happened to be at that game. But then that led into controversial pictures, and there was a discussion about
it's a slippery
textbooks.
slope,
And
right.
yeah, it was a very slippery slope. And in the world we live in now, when you talk about, say, the Russian Federation flag or the
Right, exactly,
Ukrainian
right.
flag, or Palestinian flag, or, so I'd rather be broad, and we address those items in 516 as intended.
That makes sense.
So just so I'm clear, did the panel want me to include a definition of flag?
I don't,
Flag and banner? I mean, I don't know, to differentiate between
May
the
not need
two.
it. I don't know.
We
I
need
mean,
it.
since we're kind of incorporating the two, so if
I
I'm going to
don't-
separate out the two, then I don't think there's a definition necessary.
Right, I mean, I didn't feel like definitions were necessary when
Banners are inclusive of,
flags are inclusive of
banners
banners.
are inclusive,
Yeah.
then I don't think it's necessary.
I do have a question. So in regards to regulations, how, and this could just be me, but I'm not aware of any notification that an actual regulation has been posted.
So we share on a monthly basis to all employees that that are regulation changes that have made in the prior month. As a part of the employee employee bulletin. If it's directly affecting school-based staff, it gets also included in the weekly wrap-up that Dr. Alavito circulates to principals. So we have multiple vehicles for it, and then of course it's posted to our website, so anybody who's looking for a regulation will find the changes.
So are you thinking, but the board doesn't get specifically
You
notified?
should get the employee ones, don't you? You don't get the employee ones?
We get the wellness?
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure we get, I
I
don't
don't-
recall other things.
I know, I'd
Yeah.
have to go back and really do a search to see whether or not it
I
actually
don't-
was addressed as an employee.
That could be an easy blurb that we could
I
just
can-
send to Catherine, who could pass on whatever you're drafting.
I'll add it to my legal update.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I can add it.
It's helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
For
Yeah,
policy
100%.
to
Yeah.
kind of,
We can add a section to my legal update to you that these are the policies that have been updated and these are the regulations that have been updated and the dates. And that's all that needs to be said.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So Nikki, did you catch that? Okay. Because they're the ones who are actually going to make that happen.
Let's be real here.
So advance this to the board, edits.
I don't know, yeah.
I mean, again, it'll be going for first reading, so.
First reading, which,
Yeah.
well, yes.
Which will come back to you
please.
probably anyway.
Right, okay, yes. I'll make a motion, we move this as it stands presented today to policy committee to the board for first reading.
With the correction of the comma in the regions which Dr. Lee will confirm.
Discuss
Code, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
No Nancy's saying no correction. I'm sorry, the motion does not allow me to.
With the one comma,
Yes,
minus
that's okay.
comma.
I don't care.
I also have to capitalize
That's
nation.
technical, right?
And
That's a
flag.
technical change, right? So that's like,
And get your nouns right.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? All right, it's unanimous. We'll move that on to the board for first reading.
Excellent.
All right, 1.08, or sorry, 1.7, Policy 101, Organization of the Board.
So this is before the policy committee for the first time. It is here at the request of at least 3 members of the board. It was adopted in June of 2023, revised multiple times over the years, and most recently revised in May of 2024. We do not have staff recommended edits. We are here to understand what the board's interests in revisions, but if you want my thoughts, I've got some.
Okay?
One is, of course, incorporating the delegation of authority from policy 400 that we talked about earlier to into the policy. If you look at D2C,
so say that again, incorporating the delegation of authority.
The link.
from policy 400 that we are taking out of policy 400 because it speaks to delegating authority to a board member.
Yeah, because it just kind of vaguely says the board vice president in the absence of the board president. The board vice president performs the duties of the president, but I think we need to reference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So if you look to D2C, so implementation officers and C, the board, it says the board officers on behalf of the full board are responsible for conducting the evaluations of board employees. I would recommend that that be changed to board president with input from board members. I think it creates a challenge when you have multiple people trying to do an evaluation of one person or 2 people because you have a handful of employees.
Well, and that's how we do it. It's only the board.
And only the board president currently does it.
Yeah. I was
And
gonna
so
say
that would
that's
be,
been the
that would be a more
practice.
consistent
Yeah.
statement of the
Agreed.
practice.
Yep.
And then in D3,
So, but hold, I want to step back here. So conducts the evaluation, which means that that's the actual physical activity of the evaluation being conducted.
Right.
But board members contribute.
Correct, absolutely.
Yes.
Input
That's
to
what
the
he's
board-
saying to add.
yeah,
You're
input,
saying to
Yes,
add.
he's saying to
that.
add.
Yes.
input from board members.
Yes.
So that way, Ray receives the feedback from
That's
you
how we
all
run it.
and collates it as opposed to each of you providing feedback to the individual, because that can create confusion, it can create conflict, and it's
Okay.
just a lot more work.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's been the
that's
practice.
the whole
of
discussion around our evaluation tool, that the evaluation tool is completed and then provided to
At least since
the
Sue
board
Johnson.
president for,
She's, right, just like any other, one, the board president signs our MOUs, the board president signs, our contracts. It's sort of, it's like that same thing.
yep,
So,
So the only other edit I would recommend is if you go to the advisory committees section, paragraph D, advisory committees will comply with the provisions of the Maryland Open Meetings Act. I would add, except as the law may require.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the ethics panel actually is exempt from the Maryland Open Meetings Act. It is an administrative function that doesn't require publication of the agenda, allowing participation of the community. That's not required of the ethics panel. And that is the one advisory committee that is listed here that really doesn't necessarily have that same requirement that the others might. This way, it's clear that there's an exception for that particular panel. And then it's open-ended, so if there's another panel that you create that would fall within that, I mean, maybe you create a panel that to receive and consider legal advice, right? That would be another exception to the Open Meetings Act.
okay.
Those are the things that I am recommending as edits, but I know that you all have other things you
Gotcha.
want done.
I was gonna say, y'all have to refresh my memory while we brought this one back.
I can refresh your memory if you like. One probably can too.
Not
Well,
ringing
it
a
shouldn't be
bell.
hard to refresh your memory, come on.
The next one, totally.
so is this the policy in which we would define the authority of the board president in matters of decisions around board funds being spent. So, we have a budget, and then I guess what I'm trying to express is that I feel like there needs to be clarification on when the board president has autonomy to make decisions and when the full board needs to be brought into
Yeah.
So
the decision-making process.
to answer your question, which was, is this the place for that? The answer is yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So, I'm not as prepared as I typically am, so I do not have any language for you.
And that's
I have an
okay.
idea.
It's okay if you don't have language for me. I'm happy to craft the language.
Okay.
I just need to know what your interests are. What is it you want out of it?
I understand what you're speaking to. Here, and this is the, there's sort of I want to step back for a minute. So, I don't believe there's anything in the statute that authorizes a single member of the board to make financial commitments.
Correct.
However, there are circumstances where the board president has to authorize things that have to occur, and if those things incur cost, that's sort of a secondary thing, right? So they would have to inform their members. And so I think there are circumstances where something has to be done that the board has to do, it's their responsibility to do, and that thing might cost money. So it's not about their authority to commit the board to funds. They have to make a decision sometimes. And so I think one of the things that's been most notable is some of the, like when they have to pay legal fees or things like that, right? And so if the only option is that the board must proceed in some way and a cost is incurred associated with that, I think that's a different conversation, but the board president doesn't have authority to spend money on their own. I don't know if I'm answering.
Yes,
Yes.
I guess it's more of.
Yeah, because the
board
money's
president
secondary.
The money is secondary to the board president needing to,
Cannot commit the board to
but they have, but so.
financial obligations that are not.
That are considered discretionary.
Right.
But this is, the example I think we're probably thinking of
Without the
wasn't,
board's knowledge. So the board has to have knowledge.
Right,
of-
when I was president,
Yeah.
I always got notification of where legal fees were expended. The board was never, I'm like, I don't ever remember hearing about this. I asked Catherine, please let the board know.
Yeah.
Because the board needed to know a decision that might be made that they weren't thinking had any ramification. We had one board member who tended to do that, and it's like, I need the whole board to see what those decisions are costing us.
Right.
But you're doing on the flip side is that, the board should know how much it's costing us. And so I see what you're saying. And recently, board leadership decided to discontinue our membership in NSBA. And I expressed that I wish that had been a whole board decision. We probably would have come to the same decision, but I wished that had
Right.
been a whole board decision. So
Right.
I understand what you're saying. A lot of times it is the legal fees, so somehow we
Yeah,
need to
it does,
marry
it does
those.
tend to be, but there was, there's an instance just recently where I had a question about an item that is not a public item, it was a closed session item, and it would, if I was to seek legal counsel on that, it would be an implication to the budget, to the board budget. Because if I sought outside counsel from Andy Nussbaum, who is the counsel for the board, it would incur an expense. I would not feel as the individual board member, making that decision without having some, I guess, recognition that this expense is happening from the board president or the vice president or the full board, for that matter.
it's like, it's sort of the administrative procedure of when there are items that may have
Financial impact.
that the board president should inform the members and,
Right.
And
And give them an opportunity to, if there really is, there's a majority of the board that says, no, we're not going to go that route. You know what I'm saying?
I do, and so it's interesting that Dr. Shergo uses the term administrative function, because that really could be where this lives. It could be that the policy says on an annual basis, at the board's annual meeting or at the board's, annual retreat to start the year, wherever it is you agree on your handbook, it could be that that's when you make a decision as a board. Here's how those kinds of decisions will get made, because that really is an administrative function. We don't necessarily have to spell it out in the policy. We can redirect it to when the whole board is together and you make a decision as a group. This is the way our board wants to function. The advantage of that is different boards may have different approaches. It may be that, 10 years from now, Nancy, you're still on the board because you've been a longstanding. I know, and I specifically chose you for that reason.
I feel like I've been cursed.
But it may be that 10 years from now, you're still on the board and you're the president, and you've been the president for years because the board as a whole trusts you as their leader, and they're willing to imbue you with that authority. You may not want it in policy that specifically says it must be a certain way. You may want to leave that to the admin function and incorporation in your handbook.
I don't know. I guess, there's this whole, around the board, it's a collective decision-making process. And I think that, I feel like there needs to be some language in there that expresses that no one board member, and we even have that stated in the handbook, no one board member really can make a decision, a collective decision, without the knowledge of the board.
I mean, one of the things you could do is you could sort of signal the policies are about values, right? And so what you could do is you could signal that it is the, sort of expectation that the board president confer and consult with their colleagues on all matters of board governance. And so it's sort of, it's like
financial.
It includes everything, right? It's like saying, we should be working together and we should be consulting, confer, but it's not that all decisions are made by consensus, because I think the challenge is there may be a time where someone says, I'll use Karen's example. Well, I think we should still do NSB. It's like nothing, and everything's a vote or a majority. It's like at some point the board president, like any great leader, needs to take the input and make a decision on behalf of the board. But the spirit of what you're saying is about being informed,
right,
and being notified and having an opportunity to share your thoughts. And so I think the spirit of is the board president will confer and consult with their colleagues on all matters of significance in terms of board operations and governance. Speaks to that, and then you can have the conversation in administrative function.
Yeah, I think there probably just needs more articulation regarding around situations, because where there's a legal
Right, you don't have a choice.
guidance, you have no choice. I mean, we're all talking about the same situation. There was no choice. It wasn't like you couldn't take it to the board and say, we're going to vote on this. You weren't going to vote on that.
There was no alternative because the law said it had to be done in a certain way.
There has to be some articulation around timeliness, around immediacy, but there still should be a responsibility of board leadership to inform the board as soon as
matters of significance
possible.
Correct.
Call an emergency administrative function or a closed session
right.
at the first available time to discuss matters of. And I think we have to articulate that so there's more comfort around
And
that.
at that time, the president could say to the board, we are not addressing this as a matter of action item for vote.
Right.
We're addressing this as you indicated. So, but it still needs to be communicated.
Correct.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. With some expediency.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
With-
not at the next board meeting.
Right, exactly.
Right.
As
And not via text message, right.
that we call a virtual meeting immediately and say, here's what we've done, here's why we did it.
Into legal
and-
things.
Well, so then, when you start to say we call an emergency meeting, then I start having Open Meetings Act heart palpitations.
Yes, and so does
Because
Catherine.
and so does Catherine, because we have certain requirements about notice and open, moving into closed or moving into administrative function, and we have to be aware of that. And there are times when we have the time to do that. There are times when we are not going to have the time to get 7 people to find time in their schedule. You're all in different stages of your careers,
Yeah, but the
and
effort
that can be
needs to be
challenged.
made.
That's my thing, is we articulate in policy that the effort will be made
Yes.
under the guise of the Open Meetings Act. And if that's your pride, if a board member, if we say,
Well,
okay,
if I
we've had an
can't make
emergency
it-
and we're having a meeting tomorrow night and you can't make it,
Yeah, I mean, that's on me.
too bad.
Yeah.
Agreed, but like tomorrow night, there's some allowable time. Like you still have to notify the public that you're doing this.
Well,
And the Open Meetings Act,
Legally?
the Open Meetings Act allows for emergency meetings because emergencies happen, and sometimes you have to have a meeting with less than optimal amount of notice. There has to be a demonstration of some effort to notify the public, which of course we would do. It would get posted to the website, it would get circulated via email. You know, we would do those things that we would.
I think we go above and beyond with our
The place where you, I mean, especially if
to the
it's
public as far as our agendas and things like that.
going to be a decision action, reaching quorum may become an issue. I mean, something that we're required to do by law, that we have to have an expenditure of funds for, if the philosophies of the board members disagreed with that, and there were enough of those individuals who say, you know what, I'm not going to participate so we don't have quorum, to keep that from happening, would I accuse this board or anyone on this of doing something like that? No, but I also watched the news and saw a bunch of legislators in Texas go to Massachusetts, right? Because they didn't want to participate, or they wanted to hold up a vote on the boundaries for voting districts.
I think it's potentially there, but I don't think I wouldn't not do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I'm certainly not saying anybody, please don't take that to mean I think anybody on this board would do that, but I don't know what the future boards will look like.
Right.
We're trying to future-proof here.
Yeah.
So therefore, shouldn't we articulate in the policy what constitutes, again, what constitutes the president's powers? And then subsequent meetings within those powers are just informational. Because they're just informing the board of decisions that had to be made.
Well, I think it's an interesting question about what lives in your administrative procedures and then what lives in policy, because when I think about things like that are delegated to the president, like the president, vice president do agenda setting with the superintendent.
Right.
They do the evaluation. I wonder, I don't know that there's necessarily such a list as you described. I think it much more.
It's vague. I mean, it talks about contracts and.
Yeah,
Right, but I mean, in terms of, what I hear you all talking about is more about your communication norms. It's like, we understand that there are things that the board president will have to do because they're timely, they're legal,
Right,
they're all of
right,
those things, but we want to be informed. So to me, that's like in the communication norms area more than the.
So that's a good point, that, on the administrative side, when it comes to the board handbook, and you outline.
These are our procedures for how we communicate with each other.
These are expectations of the board officer as president, as the board officer as vice president,
Right.
and.
And I would even argue.
Each board member.
Absolutely, and I would even argue that there's room for the reciprocal list in the procedures around the obligations of board members that you make visible in your norms. Things like, we will notify each other if we're, talking to a constituent about an issue, or if we have an item that we'd like committed in terms of an agenda. I think there's sort of a lot of that reciprocal communication norms that you all do that you just might want to codify.
I can certainly draft some language. I could even, in theory, draft different variations that have different levels of.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah. Are we good with that? And we'll just
Yeah.
bring it back. It's going to come back for.
It will come back here.
Come back here.
It's scheduled for October 22nd.
Perfect. Is that good for you? Is that enough time?
That's fine. When I set out the roadmap, I considered what work am I going to have to do.
Does that need to be a motion to bring it back?
No.
No.
Okay.
So that brings us to 102. If I may jump for you, Mr. Rose.
Yes, please.
Item 108, policy 102. This too is before the policy committee at the request of at least 3 board members. It was adopted in March of 2010, revised in November of 2020, and again in July of 2023. Matter of fact, I think this was the first policy that I brought through the whole process and got in revisions. So we are here to understand the board's interests. I do not have any drafted language, but I do have, again, some thoughts if you'd like to hear them.
I have some thoughts too that I'm going to pass around.
Fantastic.
I sent
Oh, here,
everybody.
give me one, because
Yeah.
one's for, there.
Yeah. I sent a table.
And I'm sorry I don't have one for Sarah, but
That's okay.
No,
This
she
is
and I,
a
she and I can
meeting.
share.
What
So
every county does on public comment.
one of the
You have this?
no, that's what I said. Sorry, I
I'll
didn't.
follow along, gotcha.
one of the things that we have, this year we did, we've not done it past years, we did not have a July meeting. And that was well received. And it was necessary because we were switching over from board docs to Granicus, and there were some technical challenges that made it impossible for us to have a meeting. As much as I know that that was well received, and I'm not going to be popular with my colleagues when I say this, I think we are required to have a July meeting. The Maryland Code at 4-107 requires us to have an annual meeting, the board, not us, the board, to have an annual meeting on or as near as possible to the second Tuesday in July. There are certain counties, it is in the code.
Oh, interesting.
There are certain counties, however, that are specifically articulated. There's, I think, 6 or 7.
Can we just only have meetings in July and not have any other meetings?
Well, actually, the way the code is written is you have to have an annual meeting, and then you can have any other meetings you feel is necessary.
We never have the retreat,
Um,
right?
I don't know that the retreat counts as the meeting. I don't
It
know.
has to be a public.
To be an open meeting.
Public meeting. Now, the law does exempt certain counties and provide different deadlines for holding the annual meeting for certain counties. So one of the things you might consider is asking our delegation to propose legislation to move our annual meeting to correspond with the December meeting at which officers are elected, which is also in the statute.
Okay.
The December election is in the statute that creates and authorizes the Board of Education of Frederick County. So there is an inconsistency between those that
Catherine,
maybe,
we're going handbook statute.
it may be something you want to talk up to the delegation about proposing legislation to harmonize. And then if that happens, then the board could move away from having a July meeting. But as it stands right now, I hate to say this because my colleagues are going to hate me for it, but I think you have to.
Do you think their original thinking was because that's the first month of the fiscal year?
That's what I was gonna ask.
But
Yes, that's what.
most of the other ones have them moved to December or
I
January.
mean, we're,
Now, if we want to if we really want to split hairs, though, what constitutes a meeting? Because you can have a meeting with one item on the agenda,
Could be virtual.
right? And it could be,
could be.
right.
Yeah.
I will say that a lot of our colleagues across the state do a July meeting specifically for staffing appointments,
yeah.
right? So that certainly would be something that if you have to have a meeting, but you don't have, space that pours a vacuum, so we know we'll fill up the agenda, but you could also say that the meetings in July will be limited in scope, so that it's a 30-minute
Yeah.
or 45-minute meeting.
If there's
Okay.
a July meeting, that's typically the one for us that the student members first gonna be coming to, where this time it was August.
So, I mean, I know that there was a lot of talk about the July meeting, and it was the break was especially after a difficult budget season is appreciated. It allows people to take vacations without having to miss something, but I think you need to talk to your legislators and suggest to them a revision to the code.
This might be
Okay.
one the delegation can all get
We
on
might
board.
actually agree on.
Yeah.
So I do have others, but you know what, frankly, we're at 11:08, we only have 22 minutes. I think I'd rather hear from you, and I will, in the drafting, incorporate my proposed edits as a staff recommended item, and you all can decide whether to accept them or not when we get to the next presentation. So it starts on page 52 of the agenda packet if you want to look at the current policy. But I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Rose, because you've done some thinking about this.
Well, I did a lot of research, legal and otherwise, because my largest concern and the whole reason for bringing this back forward is decorum in our boardroom during public comment. I mean, that's
Yes.
my
Agreed.
whole reason is for this. And as
Yes.
much as it pains me, there are certainly a lot of laws, as we know. First Amendment is quite broad and allowing, but I do think we could, it's kind of, I look at it like some of the changes we're proposing, one change we're have to make in 443. We're not compelling speech. I think we can, it's still okay to ask. It's still okay to, you shall, you know. So, and I do think there are limitations. The Supreme Court even stated that there were Supreme Court in that decision that allowed profanity and obscenity.
This is a limited.
There is a limit
Right.
to that.
I think people, and I'm sorry to interrupt, because I like most of what you've said, because just, you know, I researched what every county did and then kind of put what were some common things, such as ease of access to how the public should sign up, which we have. Very good. And also some other things that I thought should be in there. I think you've addressed them all. Now I forgot where I was going with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. Now, this is a rough, like I said, but this is based on my research.
So it looks like
Oh,
we're
I'm
really
sorry.
just providing some additional guidelines of conduct.
Yes.
Correct.
You're doing.
Specific.
But specific, because we don't have specific
don't have
guidelines of conduct for us all to
Right.
agree upon as policy
Right.
and feel comfortable when the president or vice president
Yeah.
calls it out.
Right.
That there
That was my point I was gonna make, was
limits of behavior.
We don't have to have public.
I understand that, but you know, the one thing that I think that will become a problem is these personal attacks directed toward the board, staff, or audience members are prohibited. I think that is restricting speech, and, I mean, you
Yeah.
have to allow
You have the right to
people-
do.
But you actually, that is not protected.
But, I don't know.
I would pull board out of that. I don't mind.
I'm just
Yeah.
sharing
We're
that.
We're elected officials. We should be in a position to be criticized by the
Staff
public.
and audience, I
That's
agree
not
with.
what this is saying, though. This is not criticism. This is attacks and harassment. Personal attacks directed towards board. That, we'd have to discuss that.
I would
There's a
think you
difference
would
between
have to-
criticism and personal attacks.
Yes.
And I think
Personal
you have to
attacks are
define
not
that.
protected.
Well, personal attacks, comma, not criticism, or criticism is allowed, personal attacks are not.
Correct.
Yes.
And
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Because I was pulling board out of there.
Yes.
One of the things that I think you're getting at is the so what.
Yeah.
Right, so when someone does not demonstrate the decorum that you've established as the standard for public comment, the question is less so what is not allowed, but then so what happens when they violate that, right? So it's like with our code of conduct, there is a disciplinary process that happens when you violate that. And so the thing you almost might need more in your policy, beyond, I think it's very appropriate and consistent to set what your standards for decorum are and civility. That makes total sense. The question isn't, can we restrict people's speech? Probably not. But what happens when they violate what the board has said is their standard? And then that gets into the restricting people's access, the opportunity to give public comment, which you would have full authority to do. You could say, this person will not be allowed to provide public comment. That doesn't prevent them from emailing you what they think about you. That doesn't prevent them from communicating in all the different other ways. You're talking specifically about this one specific opportunity, which is not the only one. I think it's interesting because where people get, you can't touch public comment, it's like, well, you can, because it's not your only way of interacting with us. You can email us, you can write us, you can do all kinds of things. This is one of many opportunities, so if you don't have access to this one, you still have these others available to you. So I think that's something the board may want to think about, which is sort of how will you treat circumstances of violation? Who gets to decide that someone's violated the norm? Is it,
Right.
is it the use of profanity, which is a very clear standard, or is it I'm offended by what you've said, right? So those are some of the things that I think the board will have to articulate.
Yes.
The one thing I would also like to elevate is there is something, and I'll just take my personal privilege and access to you to share this, around the way in which this particular board uses public comment that is quite unusual compared to other systems. You provide a very long runway and period of time for public comment that is different than other school systems. Both in where it's located in your meeting and the amount of time that's allotted to it. So that's something to think about.
And I was going to ask that question, is there an appetite for this board to reduce from 3 minutes to 2 minutes? Because 3 minutes is an awfully long time.
There is.
Well, you see there is, and at the same time, Nancy is shaking her head no. So
I've found at our meetings, what proved it to me was when we had all those people sign up during our discussions around 443 and 444, and it was 2 minutes, and it was perfect. And it was more than enough
with the state
to get your point.
Which
And that's
I
the reason
hate.
and it
chose 2 minutes.
Advantage of 2
aligns with testimony at the state level. And it just struck me that the testimonies were concise, to the point, and we were able to accommodate more speakers in
And that's the
amount of time.
advantages of 2 minutes. If you're not shortening the total amount of time allocated, you then increase the number of people you get to hear from.
That's the one reason I would go for that. I've testified at state meetings. I hate it.
2 minutes is hard.
It's like you're like, you know.
But I will say this, the minute allocation aside for the individual speaker, the total amount of time. You know, if we really were sort of step out and look at the board meetings, you all don't get to the business of the board until 7:30, 7:45 at night. So the question is like, so to what extent do your meetings reflect the work that you really want to do? Right now, it says that really hearing from the community is the most important thing that we want to do right now, and that may remain. So I think that should sort of inform how you decide to go, but many school systems are limiting it to a 30-minute period or a 45-minute period. But the other piece is something that is not required in Robert's rules, that is sort of, I think, a norm here that you might want to think about, which is you aren't required to ask for public comment on action items. And so in many other boards, there's no public comment period associated with action items. The complexity here is that because so many of the public comments are not associated with the action items on the agenda, if you don't do that, you may miss hearing from people who want to comment on action items.
Well,
It's just something to think about.
Mr. Rose, in his draft, retains that, but has a time limit on that, which is appropriate. I would actually advocate the opposite of what Dr. Shergo suggests.
Great.
I would advocate get rid of the general public comment period and make it only public comment on action items. Because then the comments are focused on the board business.
I
don't think that's gonna
There's
fly.
been a precedent set
Yeah.
with prior boards
Yeah.
about the ability of the public to be heard
And-
by the Board of Education.
And you have
I
that in
think-
your community listening sessions. So you give opportunities to hear that voice.
And there would be an opportunity, I think, maybe in this policy to define the areas in which the public can communicate with the board outside of public comment, just so that they, you know, if the public does read the policy, they understand there are other avenues for them other than getting up and standing in front of the podium and talking to the board when the board meetings are being conducted. However, I still feel that the amount of feedback that I have received from the community is that if we don't continue with the ability to provide adequate time for public comment, that we are not being transparent, that we are trying, you know, and that is not our intention.
Sure.
But it certainly conveys that way, that we are closing out the public to the business of the board.
If I can say, I think we're all heading towards some other restrictions. If I interrupt
Yes.
myself, we go back. Prior to modifying this, we used to have 30 minutes and then ad nauseum till midnight.
Yeah, that's true. That's how it was a few years
So-
ago. That's true.
We made that step. People thought the world was going to fall apart. This was going to fail in court.
Yeah.
None of that happened. They've gotten used to it. Fewer than, not going to make everybody happy. Fewer complaints. I'm willing to go the 2 minutes to
And
get more speakers.
I didn't put that in here.
Right, you put
It's just a
3 minutes.
discussion, that's just a
Yeah.
discussion item.
I would think about that, to get more speakers, while not at this time lessening that hour, because we're gonna make other things where people are gonna feel restricted. One of the ones that I think is really important, that would have helped at I think the previous meeting or a recent meeting was, I know I read it in here, that yes, comments must be directed to the board, not third parties, staff, or the audience, and that audience members should refrain. We had, a little mano a mano here with a speaker and a person, and I talked to the person later, but there needs to be what's gonna happen if they cross that line.
So what?
Yeah.
That's
That's
super.
what you're saying.
Exactly.
And we've
And-
never had that out there. There's
Yeah.
never been a
Right.
consequence or and I did study a lot of other LEAs too to see, well, what do other people do? And a lot of people require, you prove that you are a resident of Frederick County. You prove that you are a stakeholder in our school system.
Is that something the panel is interested, that a requirement that you be a Frederick County resident to speak?
Everybody is a stakeholder. They're a taxpayer.
who do
If they
you-
reside in Frederick County, they're a
But some of them don't.
stakeholder.
If they do
But how do
reside,
you
that's what I mean.
prove that?
Some-
It wouldn't be to restrict, it would be to say that if you are not a Frederick County resident, you're not going to be given the opportunity.
To speak.
Because Frederick County residents pay the property taxes that fund.
But the state does too. So, I mean, I don't know. I think you walk a
Well, how do you
line
prove?
where you're
Well, you
gonna.
require,
That could be
you
in your
require a
pri-
driver's license.
It could be in your
state-issued ID.
I would also think about what's reasonable for Catherine to manage.
Yeah.
Right, I think, I think what you can say, right, now Catherine's checking people's driver's license. But I do think you can signal what your prioritization process will be for public comment,
Yeah.
right?
And Fairfax County has instituted this with success.
Right, I think,
If you're not
Yeah,
a
that
resident
was
of
one of
Fairfax County, you cannot speak at a Fairfax
and I
County.
think it's something worthwhile to consider only in so much as what we are finding at a national level, and it's already actually been signaled that this is likely to happen at our September board meeting, is that outside groups are using local board meetings as an opportunity to sort of move their platform along, staging protests and things like that.
Especially during campaign season.
Right, I hadn't even thought about that, but, I think you can signal what you prioritize. I don't know if you need to have the strength of like restriction, allowed, not allowed, but like these are our priorities, and so when someone doesn't get a spot,
Well, this is why.
this is why.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
I'm
think
good
that's
with
okay to
that.
say that.
Yeah.
Like, it's,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we learned that we have to say these things out loud.
yes.
Because respect and decorum are essential to conduct business.
Business.
I mean,
We're
this is a
here
place
to-
of business.
Yes.
Also, this is an FCPS building.
Yes.
And we have all these policies, thousands of policies and regulations that we go by, that we expect everyone in all of our buildings to go by. So why would it be different in this room? It's not. It's just not.
We wouldn't be the test case, we can wait to see, because there actually are two school systems, I believe out west, that are in litigation, because they instituted code of conduct that matched their student code of conduct, which prohibited profanity, obscenity, and
I
that
don't
type
think
of
that
thing.
that's
I'm just
unreasonable. I
adding,
don't
yeah.
think that that's
And I'm-
unreasonable.
I don't have a problem with that at
And
all.
it's in litigation, because that breaches established
Yeah.
Supreme Court decisions, but they're willing to go there,
I-
because,
But I think
Yeah.
we can set
so,
a standard of expectations.
that's why I was saying, we can
You know,
still say
yeah.
shall.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and there can still be some lines where, if it doesn't constitute an actual point,
Yeah.
there's no point, there's no point.
I mean, if
Yeah.
somebody just got up there just to
To
curse
to
out
recite,
obscenities
to
or whatever.
recite
Yeah.
George
Gee,
Carlin's
that
7
hurts.
words that you can't say on
And
TV.
you don't have
That
that
has no
extra 2
point.
minutes to
Yeah.
wait.
That's
No.
not, that's actually not protected. And
No.
Yes.
if you
Good
got
point.
specific, and I will direct you to page 3,
Yeah.
where I got specific about the law is the reserved rights, where you talked about, and because you have to be specific, that's one of the points of the Supreme Court decision, is we must be specific, we can't be broad. So again, this policy says it does not infringe upon criticism of the board,
Yes.
its members,
Ah, there we
or
go.
its policies,
Good.
so long as the criticism does not violate B or C,
Perfect.
which is attacking you
Yes.
personally.
Perfect.
They can say, Dean, I totally disagree with your effing decision on policy 100. I don't like what you said, I don't appreciate your work, that type of thing. That's criticism.
Yep.
There's a difference between harassment of you
Yes.
you
Agreed.
know,
Yes.
That's good.
versus,
Yeah, 100%.
I like
and criticism of your decisions and your,
Okay.
Work.
I do think that there will be, I'm not opposed to explaining or putting into print or having in the policy our expectations of conduct. And what, and if those expectations are not met, then this is the what if. This is what,
That's what you're
so
saying, right,
what?
exactly.
You say, you may be removed, you may
Removed,
be asked,
restricted.
restricted, you may be prohibited from attending
Future meetings.
Future meetings.
future meetings,
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because and again,
You're not gonna say prohibited from attending future
Okay.
meetings.
yeah, we can't.
That would violate the Open
They're allowed to
Meetings
come,
Act.
they can't talk.
That unless
You can
a
attend
trespass order
without,
is
but you won't be
issued.
given the privilege
We
of public
won't.
comment.
You may be deprioritized, if you're creating a ranking of prioritizations for selection for public speaking, deprioritization of those who have been deemed in violation of the decorum policy. So you will get dropped to the bottom of the list. Now, that doesn't mean they still wouldn't get to speak, because if only 5 people sign up, they're still speaking. But if there's 50 people signed up, guess what? You're now at the bottom.
And we already have the thing, if you just spoke at a meeting and it's crowded list, you may not be on the list.
Yeah.
And I would also, because I know our time is running short, I sent a letter or a legal document from Cecil County, slightly different, but disrupting a meeting during, when getting back from COVID. That was a judge the Maryland judge that is on the 4th Circuit. I understood that to be a 3-judge panel, and he wrote the decision. And he was appointed by Ronald Reagan 40 years ago, still doing it. But he had some really interesting points in there about the business of school boards. Needs to be allowed to proceed. So,
And the last paragraph outlines the specifics around meeting First Amendment compliance.
I do have a few questions, and if I can, to gauge the interest of the panel. Is there any interest in reorganizing the order in which the agenda is set so that there's a brief section early for students who want to give public comment, and then the remainder of public comment moves to the end, still with the defined time, so you're not pushing it ahead of the business of the board? Because as Dr. Sergo said, you're not getting to business till 7:30, 8 o'clock. That's already a long meeting before you even actually conducted any actual business. Is that something you would be interested in just not removing, but just reorganizing?
No.
Okay.
I agree. 'Cause
Let's get it out of the way. I tell you what, I would rather eliminate board comments.
I
Than
know.
I
Which I
would
don't
public
want.
comment.
You gotta hear the
I
board.
don't want
I
to.
I would
agree.
just eliminate board
I
comments.
agree.
Yeah,
I totally
we've had other
agree.
board
The
members.
people will hate that. They like
If
hearing.
we have
No,
every
they do
opportunity,
not. They do, they
But we
care
don't.
less what we have to say.
we talk about
That's not
holding,
true.
we talk
Yes,
about
they
holding the public to account to come and speak on issues about what the business of the board. We have every opportunity on every action item
To
to
talk.
share our thoughts.
Fair point.
Yeah.
I just think, I think,
That's a big shift.
I think,
I'm
Cut
totally.
ourselves
and there are multiple school districts who do not have board comment.
I'm not gonna do that in the staff edit.
Anyway, that's-
But if that's something you want coming out of the next meeting, we can.
I would give that up before I would give up.
I will say it is an opportunity that you don't have to highlight the things that you have heard around, that you've gone to, that you've
We have
seen. and
committee time.
but
we have
no,
committee-
I have a
I
Facebook
disagree.
page, I
I would not.
That
We
was-
cut ourselves to 3 minutes. I'm good with that. That was only since Sue Johnson.
that is, again, I'm gonna leave it in, but if you want it out of the edited version, we will take it out as part of the process at the next meeting that this appears at. And it sounds like right now you've got.
I'm saying if there was an either or, I'd eliminate board comments because we have every opportunity to speak on every item before the board.
Yeah.
I have to say, I like public comment at the beginning.
I do too.
The reason for that is,
I agree.
in our town government, we have the same discussion, they always have it at the end, and I thought, well, I saw this agenda item that I really care about, I want you to hear what I have to say before you have your conversation and make those decisions. And I know it's late and it's a lot at the beginning of a lot of these meetings, a lot. but I do like that it's at the
When
beginning.
public comment is being given on the motions, on the actions, you have the opportunity to give it before the action is
that
made
is
anyway. So that really would reserve those,
There aren't.
that would really reserve the time. Well, no, because discussion can continue after that.
Yeah.
It can, but it comes out.
I just don't like the thoughts of January, February, March, we are bearing down on the budget, and it's 9 or 10 o'clock regardless, and now we're having public comment.
That's fine.
I-
I was asking for the
Out
appetite.
regularly around 9 o'clock.
I'd rather
so-
get them,
That's all right.
I'd rather get it done.
Yeah, but I also feel that the reason why we have it placed there is because we want to be considerate for the families and the parents who come to speak. Because we know that these families have kids that are in the school system that need to get to bed or need to go home, get their homework done, whatever. So they can come in, they can do their spiel and go home.
Well, that's why I would
If they
think the
want, they don't
students.
have to stay.
Because you see how many leave right after a public
Right,
comment.
right. Yeah, exactly.
But I want to, the whole point of this is, when we're running up here,
Fine,
is
go over.
is emphasizing some decorum.
Yes.
Because I've heard this, I can say 100 times guaranteed, is that people are embarrassed by what's happening in this
Yes.
boardroom. And that children are, this is for our students. Ultimately, in our students, there are many parents that won't allow they will not allow their students. I've heard multiple parents have reached out to me and said, my children used to always watch, they used to occasionally attend, and now
watched kids
they
grow up.
cannot. And
So I will incorporate this. I may not incorporate it verbatim, but this gives me a strong statement of the intent. So when we're drafting the revisions, I will rely heavily on this. A couple of other questions for whether the panel has an appetite. Splitting time. One person who comes up and says, and I'm going to give a minute of my time to someone else. No splitting time. Good to know.
no recorded.
That was my next one.
Either.
No recorded, presentation of recorded audio or
And
video.
wait, I need to back up. What about you,
Unless you have a disability.
Unless you have a
Ms. Dima, who
I
is
was
blind?
I wish she would just talk to us instead of having somebody else talk to us, but that's her preference.
That's her right under the disability. So unless they have a disability,
No, agreed, absolutely.
no recorded devices, no recorded
No
speeches.
splitting time, no presentation of recorded audio or video, and not, except for in the circumstance where you're accommodating a need, no registering for someone else, including your children.
Correct.
Because we saw that a lot this year, where parents would sign up and say, I actually don't want to speak, I'm going to give my children this chance to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, then sign your children up.
Yeah.
You can sign them up. We encourage you to sign them up. We have a dedicated number of slots so you can sign up your children. Don't sign up for yourself and then assign someone else. It's an administrative need because it makes it harder for Catherine to track who's actually making the public comment.
Right, and that could go to, you must sign yourself under your own name,
Yes.
So you're asking
Under
for.
your legal name.
your legal name.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, what we're going to record your actual name is what is really to be said there, right? Because there's only really one person right now who's doing something differently, so we record their actual.
It's going to get excessive.
Yeah, but the disruptive conduct section, you want us to tease that out a little bit more around what the response will be to conduct that doesn't meet your standard?
Well, I'll propose some.
That's some of the suggestions.
Yeah, I just want to make sure where it was supposed to
And
go.
for instance, like we learned during COVID, it tends to have to be the president that has to call the law enforcement. So that needs to be stated if that's the case.
Well, that goes back to
I know.
other
the
policy,
other policy,
the authority of the president to make that decision in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they are. Most policies say the presiding officer. And in this case, the president is the presiding officer over comment.
So I just want to bring up another point about public comment. When we had, and this is around the redistricting comments, public comments that we had, we had, 10 people from the same community. To me, it would be a better use of public comment time instead of repeating 10 times the same message, to have that community come together and have a spokesperson.
That did appear in some of the policies that I reviewed.
Really, yeah,
Interesting.
so that.
But we don't want to go back to.
I don't-
Go
yeah.
back to the organization and you get 5 minutes.
Oh,
because-
no, there was no time change. There was no
I
time
think
change. It just reiterated that.
they wanted, they sort of, I think the belief is that you will appreciate the significance of the concern concern when you see all the people talking
I
about the
agree.
same item, but
That's
yeah.
what they think,
But
yes.
it would be an opportunity, but
Yeah, that's
it
what they
should
think.
give an
Anyone?
opportunity to the person to say, these are the constituents who are, you
Please
know,
stand if you
are-
I count emails much more than how many people.
I don't know.
Here's a
I don't
petition
think
from the
that- I don't think we
community
can
signed
control
by
everything.
25 members.
Yes, that would be powerful.
Yeah.
You do
It's
want
an
to,
alternative to having 10 people show up and give the comment.
Fair point, yeah.
And is it addressed, sorry if I'm forgetting, I'm not sure it's addressed about, but maybe it is, that if they have something to give to us, they'll either give it,
It's not addressed specifically in the policy. That's more of an admin function that we incorporated. We can,
Yeah.
it's fine to leave it as an admin function, honestly.
Well, what about the idea of, and one of the things is that public commenters or members of the public are not permitted to approach the dais?
that's where it comes in with if you
Correct.
have things, and that's where it gives them.
Promote or ascend the
That is
dais?
something I would like to add.
Yes.
And
I would like
that
to
if
see
you
that.
have documents you'd like attributed to the board members, they should be left at the desk and will be distributed or handed to
But
the.
I think for your own comfort,
assistant.
like that they're not permitted to approach or ascend the dais is important to understand, like that's actually not a public space. It's your personal space. Inside of a public space. I know there's historically been some issues with that. Prior to the last couple of years.
Well,
I mean,
that
people
door
have-
didn't used to be locked, and now it's
Well,
like, right?
people have approached and, I mean, yeah.
So the only other item we have on our agenda, because I think we've concluded 102, the discussion of 102, is the upcoming policy meeting and the anticipated roadmap. You'll see that as quickly as I created a roadmap, I had to change the roadmap. So what I've presented this is just for your awareness, there's no discussion needed. I've adjusted the next couple of meetings to align with the change in when we wanted to discuss certain things. I've tried to rebalance it to maintain the balance of 5 to 6 policies, because there's 6 policies in 2 hours is a lot. And I mean, you can see, it's in front of you. You can see how it looks a little bit different from what I originally presented to what the roadmap now looks like.
So what are the colors?
Oh, that was just the only purpose of the color is to help you see where it shows up once and then a second time. So organization of the board in brown in August, it's there again in October, and it's brown to kind of draw the eye to the same color. There's no other significance to the colors.
I'm looking for a key,
Well,
like an asterisk.
I know, that's what I was looking for, the key, like,
It was really just to help you see it show up twice, because look, there's a
Yeah,
long
that
list of
makes
words,
sense.
and you
yeah,
know.
that makes sense.
Okay,
I
good.
appreciate that. Okay, good.
No, there was no other. No hidden meeting, no Easter eggs, nothing like that.
Well, I thought, sometimes I do that myself in a spreadsheet, because I know what it, and
Well,
then if
and
I
in the
share,
policies,
if I
it's got
share it,
colors,
it doesn't
yeah.
really mean anything to
Right.
anybody else, but, yeah.
Completely fair. It really is, again, just intended to help you see that extracurricular activities shows up in March, and then it shows up again in June.
That's perfect. That makes total sense. Yeah, okay.
I say that this meeting should be adjourned at 11:38 a.m.
There you go.
Okay.
I'll second.
I don't
We're
think
voting,
we have to
I don't
have
think
a-
we
we
need to vote
don't.
for that.
We
We're
don't.
adjourned.
We don't need a, yeah.